I've spent 2 weeks analyzing hundreds of TED Talks to find out what separates a great speech from an average one. Why do some of them get millions of views while others just a few hundreds? 28 pages of notes later, I realized that the best performing TED Talks follow the same 4 steps. Today you'll uncover what those 4 steps are so that you can apply them to crush your next presentation. Step 1, hook. I realized that 90% of the most viewed TED Talks use one of 3 hooks. Just watch how they open their speech here.
In the next 18 minutes when I do our chat, 4 Americans that are alive will be dead through the food that they eat.
I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me.
They share a surprising statement. They share this unexpected statistic, fact, or statement right at the start of the speech to hook their audience. Now that breaks the pattern of what is expected. That takes their audience out of autopilot and brings them into the moment. Now that's one hook, but a lot of the best speakers also use that second hook to open their speech.
What's the scariest thing you've ever done?
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions?
They ask a question. We as humans, we're natural problem solvers. We love solving mysteries. Anytime that you put a question out there, your audience's brain will start working, immediately trying to get that answer. TED speakers know that. But hey, there's one last hook that they use, and that is by far the most effective.
So I'll start with this. A couple of years ago, an event planner called me because I was going to do a speaking event, and she called and she said, "I'm really struggling with how to write about you on the little flyer." And I thought, well, what's the struggle? And she said, "Well, I saw you speak, and I'm going to call you a researcher, I think, but I'm afraid if I call you a researcher, no one will come because they'll think you're boring and irrelevant."
They share a story. They skip the usual formalities. They're not like, "Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here." No, instead, they dive right into that personal story. The moment that their audience hears that story, they know, ooh, this is gonna be a good one. This is not gonna be the standard speech. This is gonna be something worth listening to. But once they've hooked their audience, they do one more thing to assure the audience that this will be worth their time. Step 2, big promise. They tell their audience what is in it for them. What will they gain from listening to this speech? Just see how Amy Cuddy shares her big promise.
So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes, and I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds.
She shares what the audience will gain from listening to her talk. But notice that she doesn't frame the big promise from her perspective. She frames it from the audience's perspective. The best speakers don't say, "I," such as, "I will show you the 5 steps." Instead, they say, "You. Today, you will uncover the formula to finally stick to your habits." Now, once they've shared that big promise, they then move into the main part of the speech. Step 3, body. In that part, TED speakers share their 2 to 3 main points. Now the 2 to 3 main points the audience needs to know to really get to that same big idea. But they don't just share that point, they also share why that point matters and also how they arrived at that main point. They share the evidence that backs up that point. Now that evidence usually comes in 3 ways. Either a statistic, a story, or an interactive activity. Here, for example, Amy Cuddy shares some statistic on how the blood changes when you assume power poses. Or here, Sean Aker shares a story of his brother-in-law and that shows really how we view the world shapes our reality. Or here, Graham Shaw walks his audience through the process of drawing a cartoon. He not only demonstrates it, but he also asks his audience to join along and see for themselves how easy it is. This guy even goes so far and makes the entire audience get up and join him in this rather awkward activity.
Anytime you're going to talk to anybody important, do these. First, arms up, deep breath in, and sigh out, like that. One more time.
But once they've made their main points, the speakers then move into the closing of their speech. Step 4, closing. In the closing statement, speakers usually recap the 2 to 3 main points that they want their audience to take away. But just be mindful, they don't say, here are my 10 takeaways, because that would overwhelm their audience. They focus on 1 to 3 takeaways. That's it. But once they've recapped their main points, they then usually end on this inspiring closing statement. This closing statement often leaves their audience with this positive feeling and invites them to take action. Just watch how this speaker closes.
Gentlemen, I hope that you've had fun, that you have learned, but more than anything, I hope that you feel inspired to become a greater public speaker. Because anybody can become good, anybody can become great, and everybody can become outstanding. Because it all comes down to one single thing.
Isn't that a wonderful closing? Now that's it. That's the 4-step formula that the best TED speakers use to hook their audience. Now once you've watched a few of the TED Talks, you realize that there's actually one reason why they've become so popular: storytelling. But I know storytelling, especially when you're starting off, can be a little bit overwhelming. If that's you in any way, you may want to check out this next video in which I share my favorite storytelling techniques. Enjoy.